We're live!
All right!
We did it!
We did the thing. Awesome.
We made it. I think this is good. I think we did enough here.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, for everyone, all of our lovely fans watching at home or abroad, hopefully at home, it's a global pandemic, welcome to our event. This is One More Page Books, the virtual space. My name is Amanda. I will be your host for tonight, and we are thrilled to welcome the amazing Andrea Tang to celebrate her newest book, Renegade Flight. That's where you can imagine in your head everyone clapping and cheering. Just like pause and everyone in your own homes.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that I'm getting that caption in.
Yes, exactly. And if you're not clapping at home, yeah, if you're at home, you have to clap. We'll know if you don't. So, okay, that's everyone settle down. That's enough.
All right,
that's enough.
Cool. Thank you.
So, do you mind if I introduce you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. All right, I got it written down, so you know it's like fancy. I got it from a website.
Awesome.
Yeah. Andrea Tang grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and currently resides in Washington, D.C., where she pens fiction by night and collects geopolitical gossip by day. A graduate of Bryn Mawr College and the University of Oxford, she's also a perpetually recovering theater kid, Fulbright grantee, former pentathlete, Taekwondo black belt, and serious dabbler in various martial and movement arts because she's super cool and also my very dear friend. Among other things, she enjoys superheroes, giant robots, and the endless versatility of pie. Who does not? Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It never ceases to give me like secondhand embarrassment just because it makes me sound much cooler than I really am.
But that's good. You need to give off an aura of being cool. And then when they get to know you, it's like, well, less, but still fun.
Exactly. I got to make my publicist's life easier for her. So. Exactly.
Happy release day, or day after release week.
Yeah, absolutely. My friend Meredith was actually saying, like, I feel like book birthdays, like all birthdays should be like a birthday week, not like a birthday day. And I'm like, you know what? I think you're onto something. You're a wise woman. Yeah,
no, this is still a very new book. Like, my copy's still warm. I mean, that's the cat is sitting on it, not because of the press, but like, it's also like everyone just admire this gorgeous. You have the best covers. I'm obsessed.
Yeah, Mike Heath, who is, I believe, my illustrator, like really outdoes himself with these covers. Like, I don't think I had like a particular concept in mind when we were deciding on covers, like for either Rebelwing or Renegade Flight, for that matter. And then he just pitched something. Was like, "How about this?" I was like, "Well, that's way better than anything I would have come up with." So let's go with that.
And I'd be like, "What if you drew a small dragon and there was cool things?" And then they're like, "No, what if fire and cities and dragons and cool Like, oh my god, amazing! Like, I mean, obviously I picked it up now, but like 16-year-old me would see this in the store and be like.
Right? What? Yeah, no, same. Like, I think there's like a meme somewhere on Twitter about like, yeah, like raise your hand if you were that kid who would like hang out in Barnes and Noble when you were 8 and just like buy all of the books that had pictures of dragons on the cover. And I was like, obviously I was that kid. Look at what I write now.
I know, clearly. This is a brief sideline, but when I was like 14, I hung out at my Barnes & Noble a lot where I lived, and they told me that when I turned 15, I could get a job there, and then we moved.
Oh no!
And it was devastating, and now I'm a career bookseller just to make up for that devastating loss.
So was that like the foreshadowing that put you on like the path of your true destiny to like unemployment at One More Page Books?
Yes, I was like, I will not rest until I have a job that will allow me to defeat the Barnes & Noble cafe booksellers, because I couldn't have been a regular bookseller until I was 16, but at 15 I could have worked at the cafe.
Oh man! I mean, I would watch the epic fantasy movie about this origin story.
I know, right? Like that's my villain origin story. I like come back and I'm like, got milk, but with like a Starbucks thing.
Perfect.
We'll work on it.
Yeah, any Hollywood agents listening in, got your next big concept.
Yes, I assume that your friends and family watching this are also all Hollywood agents, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
totally.
good.
His family, definitely not your average Asian American like academics.
It's perfect. Listen,
I think you're here right now.
I've seen movies. I know there's at least one Hollywood exec who like broke the mold hiding in there somewhere.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, first we'll get your books made into movies, and then we'll pitch my Barnes & Noble villain origin story.
Perfect. We got to ease them in. Yeah, exactly. There's got to be like a gateway drug.
Yes. Speaking of gateway drugs, Renegade Flight is an amazing gateway drug to loving and reading books. Can you? That was such a weird transition, and I'm sorry about it. But...
No worries.
You know what? It's fine. I had a little bit of salsa before I did this for my dinner, and I think it's made things a little spicy in here.
That's perfect. A little spicy, so
Yes, but can you tell us about your amazing book, which released yesterday, Renegade Flight?
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. So my editor was actually the one who was responsible for writing like the dust jacket summary. Thank goodness, because I'm terrible at pitching my own work. But it is to give the standalone pitch that does not involve Rebel Wing at all, despite taking place in the same universe. I'd say it is the story of this young, hotshot, like kind of fighter pilot in training. I say fighter pilot, but like fighter pilot specifically for mechanical dragons, not for airplanes, because mechanical dragons are more fun. In living in this kind of like near future sort of cyberpunk-esque geopolitical landscape, coming up from like kind of a like apolitical military legacy family where like she's kind of expected to be this extremely high achiever and to either go into the military or go into government and like do great things there and be powerful and Machiavellian and all of that stuff. So this is the environment that has produced her, and it is kind of the story of what happens when she falls from grace, where she like goes and she sits her like first big exam to go off to like badass piloting school, and she completely messes it up, like gets in major trouble for like a cheat that she was not supposed to use. And it just like it like immediately gets her off on the wrong foot with her like kind of like lifelong chosen career path. So it's like on the surface, it's like kind of a story about navigating that, but it's also about her kind of dealing with like these creepy intrigues that are happening at that same flight academy that she attends, because you can't have a good boarding school story without something creepy happening at the boarding school, I say, as a boarding school alum.
Yes.
But essentially the premise is that the more seasoned pilots who generally go out into the world and like kind of serve as these like sort of Knights of the Round Table-esque protectors of this like kind of broken political atmosphere, like I guess like sort of like broken political world, are slowly going missing under like mysterious circumstances, and no one really knows what's happening to them. So there is this like sudden drive for recruitment and for like pushing these kids out into this role because they're running out of people and they need people to pilot these dragons and to figure out what's going on. And so Viola, my heroine, is like, this is my chance to redeem myself. So it is kind of like simultaneously like a mystery, but also her attempt at kind of authoring her own redemption arc.
Yes, I love it. I can like, it's as soon as you read it, I can feel your love of like boarding school stories and like seeping. And I'm like, oh my God, I've also read all of these boarding school stories and also loved them. And like, you can feel the influence. And it's perfect. It's like, I love Top Gun and like Top Gun adjacent media.
Yeah.
Totally. So like you mix that with boarding school stories. It's like, yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm glad you got what I was going for.
100%. So just to give everyone a bit of structure for the event. So that was the book. We're going to talk about Renegade Flight. Now, you're going to maybe think, I should leave at some point. Don't. Because at the end of the event, we're going to do a special super cool giveaway from Andrea. So don't leave. We'll know because you won't win the giveaway. Also, just a bit of housekeeping. Feel free to ask questions as we go. We'll save a little time at the end of the event to pull those questions and discuss them, but you feel free to post them as you think of them if you'd like. I'll keep an eye on the chat and pull them at the end. And feel free to put your well wishes and stuff in there too, because we're all so excited for this book. Okay, I have my sheet. Are you ready to talk about Renegade Flight some more?
I am as ready as I will ever be. Let's go.
Is that ready enough? Do we need more prep, or you feel like you're good?
I think I'm good. Okay. Let's do it.
So one of the things I think is most interesting about Renegade Flight is that it is a companion to Rebel Wing, but it's not a sequel. And it's also like a kind of a funky companion because it's set 15 years after the events of Rebel Wing, which you don't see very much in books, especially in the YA space. You maybe play with it a little bit more in the adult market. But we don't see it a lot in YA. So I would love to hear about sort of why you decided to set it that way. If you had been like considering a sequel instead, wanted to do this, like what sort of the thought process around that extremely interesting and delightful choice was.
Yeah. So definitely, like I originally signed with Rebel Wing for a 2-book deal, and we just weren't sure what that second book was going to look like originally. So I pitched a couple of different ideas to Julie, my editor, and like one of them was for a direct sequel where I was like, I guess I could make like Prue and Alex, the protagonists of the first of Rebel Wing, like continue doing stuff, but like I don't know, like I came up with this kind of lukewarm idea for them, but I was also like, yeah, but like their story really I felt wrapped up really nicely in Rebel Wing, and I didn't think that it was really necessary to kind of force them into a sequel that didn't necessarily have to exist. But I also did think, like, if I do say so myself, that I had built an interesting, fun world to play with, and
Yes, definitely.
and I wanted to see what else was kind of going on there. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe not a direct sequel about the same characters I already kind of played with in the first book, but maybe let's expand and see what else we can do with this world. So that was part of it. The other part of it is, like, I've chatted about this a little bit on Twitter, but like, I don't know, maybe this is just because like I'm an adult now, but like I've always kind of been curious, like what happens to like young adult, like scrappy young adult heroes and heroines, like after they like are like super tired, like adults in their late 20s and 30s. And I just always wanted to see that. We saw a little bit of that with REBELWING because there is like this previous generation of people who kind of played that role. But Renegade Flight was also a chance to look at that a bit more direct because you see so many kind of like cameo characters who were really young in the original novel. But like, and then I'll say like the third part of what made the idea of kind of doing this time skip story really compelling to me was also thinking about the ways that world would have changed over the course of like a decade plus. Because a lot, like, not to spoil REBELWING, but a lot of stuff happens like technologically and politically over the course of that plot that is just going to have like ramifications for like kind of the way the world order is structured. So I was like, all right. Let's do a companion novel called Surprise, Actions Have Consequences. So
perfect. That should be on the cover. I know that's like
I really should have, like, we took so long to decide on a title for the companion novel, and I can't believe I didn't pitch that. Just actions have consequences.
Hey, sometimes you have to deal with things after they happen, and they keep happening. No, I love that. Like, I think it's so cool because even if you had done like a companion novel that was like different characters in the same timeline, like you'd still be living with the same like political consequences in the world. But I really like that, like, because of what happened at the end of REBELWING, like REBELWING's events, again, not to spoil it, everyone go buy REBELWING. It's a great book. And it's in paperback now. So
it is. And it's also on sale right now. At least the ebook version is. I don't know about the rest.
Well, we don't care about that, Andrea. We only like the paper book version from One More Page books.
That's true. Also, the paper book version has some like fun extras in it. So
yes, it's delightful. Oh, hello, cat. My cat wants to buy REBELWING. But like you really get to like, it's a big thing that happens at the end of REBELWING, and it like impacts the world and like changes it drastically. And I loved getting to see sort of how that impacts it, but also be like, oh, but things are bad still.
Right? Yeah. Amazingly, like history marches on and bad things continue to happen. Like,
right. Like actions have consequences, but also like just because you do a good thing once doesn't mean that the world is fixed.
Right.
Which I think is a theme in both of your novels. Like both when you see it in REBELWING and then like the consequences in Renegade Flight and then sort of the situation in Renegade Flight.
Right.
Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that she's not like hitting something around me.
No, feel free to let your cat like cameo in on this cat.
If she like comes into a grabbable spot, I will hold her up for sure.
It's like a guest star for all of this. But yeah, absolutely. That's something I love playing with in I think like almost all of my fiction, really. And I don't know, the part of that might just be a consequence of like having been an adult professional in Washington, D.C. for too long. But I feel like that's really real. It's really complicated, and it's something that I love seeing characters contend with on this kind of like microcosmic human level.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I want to hear about Vi, our main character in Renegade Flight, because I am delighted by her. I love a hotshot pilot. Like, so tell us about our main character.
Yeah, so Vi is very much the ace, the hotshot pilot, or at least she was at the beginning of the book. After she falls from grace, things are a little bit different because she kind of has to. She's kind of got to get her groove back, you know. Like yeah,
this is like the Emperor's New Groove, but not a fighter pilot,
right? Kind of like, you know, continuing with our theme of actions have consequences. But yeah, I found her a lot of fun to write because she is extremely different from like what I was as a teenager and what I think a lot of my friends were, and even like me as an adult, really, because she kind of swaggers onto the page with a lot of confidence because she does come from this background where she is expected to do great things and has always assumed she would do great things. So in that sense, extremely different from my first protagonist, Prue, who kind of was like, I'm just gonna like do what I can to survive and like have as low profile a life as I can and like not try to get myself involved in major life-threatening political adventures, whereas right. I'm like, no, bring it on. I want to go out and like do stuff and affect change and like have everyone know my name. So like they're definitely starting from like very different places in life. But I think Vi also contends with her own insecurities, in part as a consequence of the background that she comes from, because I think the flip side of being raised with the expectation of doing great things is you then have to go and do great things. And she's like, okay, I've always expected that I would go out and do these things, but like in the process of like setting out to do them, especially kind of like having to like claw myself back out of this like disgrace that has befallen me that was totally my own fault. Like I'm realizing that like sort of the worldview I'd been raised with is not as simple as it seems. And I'm not actually sure if I can live up to like the expectations that I and my family have had for me like all my life. So that was also like, I think a really humanizing element of her character that I really liked exploring.
Yeah, no, I loved like, cause we opened the book. Would it be okay if I read the first line of your book? I'm not gonna read the first line because it's brilliant and perfect, but there's a lot of cursing. So, and this is a family stream. But I'm just gonna read the first line of the first chapter of Renegade Flights.
Go for it.
The thing that pissed Vi off the most about ruining her life and dishonoring her family was the absurd amount of work she put into her own downfall. Like, that's so good, Andrea. I love it.
I really glad you liked it. Yeah. And yes, there's a lot of swearing. That is one thing Prue and Vi do have in common, is that they both have potty mouths. So
no one's mad.
The audience.
No, I literally got one page into this book and then had to stop and text Andrea and be like, no one else is ever allowed to write again. This is the best first page I've ever seen.
Right.
And then I finished the rest of the book and it was also very good. But like I love her because she falls from grace like at the very start of the book, like even really before we pick up the action, like we come in on her fall from grace, and I love her anxiety and like insecurity of like, oh, like I was this hotshot pilot and I thought I could do no wrong, but like actually it turns out I can do pretty big wrong entirely without meaning to, because I thought I was too good. And like so much of the book is about her finding her confidence again without like becoming who she was, but finding instead who she could be. Like I related to that sort of anxiety level of like,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kind of like being like, okay, like, all right, I need to like not be like an arrogant jerk, because that's not the great way to swan through life. But I also need to like figure out how to like believe in my own capabilities as a person again and like find my moral compass. So like that balance between like having like not having no ego at all, but having just the right amount of ego, because we all need a little bit of ego through life. I think I love that you pointed out that distinction.
Oh, thanks. But also I think it's so important too for like, especially like obviously anyone of any age can enjoy this book, but like it's meant for teens and for like teen girls in particular to be able to see like you should still be proud of yourself, like and you still can do great things, like you make mistakes but like you can still rebuild. I think is so cool and important. So
yeah and that's huge, I think, for all of us, because like a lot of like where that first page came from was like as much as I say, like, I'm very different from what Vi, I as a teenager was very different from what Vi was as a teenager. I've definitely been in that place of like, oh man, I really messed up. And I didn't think that I was going to mess up like this. And I feel horrible now. And I'd do anything to take it back, but it's too late. And I have to live with the consequences and figure out where I go from here. And I think that's something that we've all encountered at one point or another. Yeah. So like, I felt like that was really important to have on the page.
Yes. And I love it. But she does, even within her like insecurity, she keeps on so much of her swagger and like cool hotshot pilot. Like, how fun was that to write? Like, I want to hear all about writing the swagger of a hotshot pilot.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, like again, total departure from like my first protagonist, much as I love Prue. And kind of like a fun balancing act, because I was like, okay, she's obviously been knocked down, like not just a few pegs, but many, many pegs. Like
every peg, she is like the peg.
Every peg there is, she is truly, she's like at the bottom now. But but I was like, okay, but like it's like one somewhat traumatic event versus like 18 years of pretty staunch conditioning to be a certain way. So that's not gonna like completely transform your personality overnight, right? So you do see that, like, that old Viola kind of like poking her head up, like every once in a while, even as she's like, oh my God, shame and disgrace. Every once in a while, she's like, I could take that person in a mech fight. Like, who are they? Like, I could do this. Like, how dare you?
And you do so much in your like IRL life, do so much like fighting and martial arts and things like that. Were you able to put some of that like fun swagger into that through that?
A little bit, yeah. No, I had a lot of fun with the fight scenes. I'm a little bit self-conscious of it because I definitely do have like training partners and like jujitsu teammates who are probably going to read it and be like, oh, she described this guard suite incorrectly. Like, I did my best to anyone from the Fighter's Garage who's listening in on this. I did try to do right by you guys to the extent that I could, especially when working with sci-fi elements like giant robots that punch each other rather than like actual like delicate human bodies. So
right. I mean, listen, it's the same. If anything seems weird, you know why? Magic. It's magic. Robot dragon magic.
Totally. But yeah, no, that was a huge influence, definitely. I think that like just kind of like having the psychology of having like done sparring and done like competition and like knowing people who have gone through that like is super useful, I think, for just getting into the psychology of it.
Yeah, well, and fight scenes are such a pain in the neck to like actually write and choreograph and be like, okay, this has to look cool, but also it has to not just sound like I'm naming different moves that they're gonna
do. Right, yeah, no, like, especially, like, I guess, like, from somebody who has some degree of a martial arts background, I'm like, okay, I need to describe this in a way that it, like, makes physical sense, but isn't just, like, jargon that will be completely incomprehensible to somebody who doesn't have that background at all.
Right.
So.
Yeah, whenever I've done fight scenes, I've always I did this in college a bunch. I'd like get my room and be like, okay, Carly, you stand there and I'm going to fight you and we're going to see if this makes sense. I'm going to read this page out loud. I'm going to do the things.
Right.
And if it stops making sense, we'll pause.
We'll just stop and we'll know that we have to go back to the drawing board. I love it.
Exactly. So we talked about this a bit already, but just to sort of get more into it, which of your main characters do you think you have more in common with? Is it Prue or is it Vi? You said you don't feel like you have as much Vi in you, but like, do you feel like you then are like strong team Prue in who you are as a person, or is it?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I don't know. Yeah, I think I would lean toward. I think teen me was definitely a bit more of a Prue.
Sure.
Like adult me, like I don't know.
Adult you is maybe one of the adults in the book who's like doing their best.
I feel like that's a trick question. Adult me might actually just be one of the tired, like late 20s, early 30s somethings who's just like, oh my God, why are teenagers like this? I was a teenager when they 100% were.
Yeah, there's certainly not another book that describes exactly how I was also like that as a teenager.
Yeah, but yeah, teen Andrea had like no swagger to speak of. Teen Andrea was kind of a mess. So I feel like in that sense, definitely Prue.
You were like aspiring for Prue even at that point.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, but we've talked about Vi, who's amazing, but we need to talk about Nicholas Lee.
Yes.
Tell me about our extremely talented soft bruiser boy, please.
Yeah, Nicholas Lee. Okay, so I don't know if I'm like capable of writing like a love interest who isn't on some level like actually just kind of like a sweetheart, like a bit of a soft boy at his core, because like even like he's introduced much more violently than like I guess like the male protagonist / implied love interest of REBELWING, but like even he like I don't know, he is this like total kind of hotshot bruiser who is like legitimately very physically dangerous, but like over like again not to spoil anything, but over the course of the book, one of the things that I liked about him is that he does like underneath it all have this like very tender personality that's kind of surprising on somebody who's introduced as being this kind of like scary, threatening person. But yeah, I'm very fond of him. I feel like he needs a hug. His life is
he's so vulnerable, and I'm just like,
his life is really unpleasant, man. Like of everyone in the book, I think he's probably got like the toughest break. Like
he really does. Like we won't go into spoilers, but like I would like I am an adult and like not at the point of my life where I'm like, oh, the teen love interest and why I love them. I'm like, I would like to take this boy and I would like to give him some tea and one of those shock blankets that they give you in ambulance and just like put him in front of a fire and let him cry for a little while.
Right, yeah, maybe like find him a good therapist. Like
I mean, let's be honest, every character in your book could use a good therapist.
Therapy, but yeah, and I loved, because this is such a tightly written, like, strict Viola POV as well. I loved writing her, like, the, like, 7 stages of, like, discovering that Nicholas Lee is actually kind of a soft boy as well. Because, like, phase 1 is definitely her just being like, I hate you. You're, like, better at fighting and piloting than I am, and it makes me angry, and, like, I need to, like, find a way to, like, beat your ass so I can get where I want. And by the time we reach stage 7, it's kind of like, oh man, I feel you make me feel all kinds of ways because I've discovered all of these other things about you now.
Right. And she's discovered so much about herself by that point too.
Right.
And like,
yeah, she also is legitimately, like, less of a jerk at that point, like, in her own right. So
yeah, no, I love it. And I'm like, because I think we'd like gently call this hate to love. It's like not like full on, but it's like lives in that category. And I'm super picky about hate to love because sometimes I'm just like, and again, this happens a little bit more in adult than in YA, but I'm like, you see them like do the hate, and I'm like, oh no, he's very mean. He's a bad person. I don't want them to fall in love. Yeah. And like they like spar, but he's never actively like cruel or mean to her.
Right, yeah. Like it gets a little heated when they like fight and spar, like, understandably, but I feel like he never like crosses a line. Like he never gets to that place of like being like actively a jerk when they're doing it. It's all business for him.
Right. It's nothing that when they are later, you know, having feelings, he would really regret and be like, I was a bad person.
I should not have done that to you. That was actually low-key physically abusive.
Right. And I appreciate that in a good hate to love. I love the banter, but I don't want bad people to have to be like redeemed in that way.
Right. So. Yeah. No, I'm very, very glad that came through, especially because they do have such like an intensely physical and like legitimately on the page violent relationship. The nature of the plot. So I felt like that was an important line to toe for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is that like it is all the like violence is very much contained to like specific matches and like designated times where like they both go in like consenting to fight.
Exactly.
It's so important.
It makes a difference for sure.
Yeah.
Like the tension and the stress is still there for sure, but it's not the same as if like somebody like randomly attacks you because
right. This is better than that. And plus she can hold her own too, which makes such a difference.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like he's not bullying her. He's fighting her.
Yeah. And like she goes in and is like, okay, I'm like nervous and scared, not sure what's going to happen. But it's the athlete's anxiety rather than like, oh my God, this person's really gonna hurt me and I'm afraid of this person as an aggressor, kind of a anxiety.
Because that's not cute. No one wants to kiss that.
No. Her anxiety is very much like I might lose and like lose really badly, and I don't like this idea. Like
No, I love it. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of the scope of the worlds in both of your book, because you do a super cool thing, Andrea, that I don't see a lot in science fiction, whereas a lot of times science fiction and fantasy stories are telling the story of like how they saved the world, how they saved the universe. And that's not what either of your books have done. You're like, these are the stories of how they saved their particular world for now, which I think is so cool. Like they are focused on doing like, okay, this is the next right thing. And I know that it won't be fixed forever, but that's literally what happens at the end of REBELWING. Like they fix it for then, but as we can see by the existence of Renegade Flight, problems still happen.
Right.
I'd love to hear about like why you play in these smaller sci-fi stories.
I think like again, that's kind of a consequence of both like kind of my general worldview, which has very much kind of been informed by like to some extent like my day job and my education, because I have like, as is kind of cheekily alluded to in my bio, like I have worked in like risk consulting and like dealt with sort of like geopolitical issues that are really messy and like corporate drama that's really messy and how that ties in with the messy geopolitical issues. And I'm just like, oh man, like looking at like the timeline of the way just like events tend to unfold like this, nothing is ever clean and easy and wrapped up easily in like a neatly tied little bow. So I didn't want to create a world where things seemed that way. But at the same time, I wanted to give my characters a measure of satisfaction in the same way that in like real life, you kind of like go about your job and your life and you're kind of like, okay, like the world is kind of a mess, especially in 2020 and 2021. but you got to take the small wins where you can. So like, I definitely set out to write characters who are like, I want to affect, or at least they get to a place where they're kind of like, I believe in like affecting good change in the world and like being kind and being a force for good where you can. But like but there's also an element of realism where it's like, okay, I am not going to single-handedly fix everything because that's not the way the world works. And I wanted, even though this is kind of like a speculative science fictional world, I wanted that to cleave, that part at least, the core of it, to cleave very closely to reality.
Yeah, and I love that because I mean, as important as it is to have books where like you can save the whole world and you can save the whole universe, like I think it's equally important to be like, sometimes you can't save the universe, but that's okay because you can like still save what needs to be saved right then. Like you're not fixing everything, but something needed to be fixed, and you didn't just say like, well, I can't save the world, so what's the point? You know, like I think that's just such a delightful. I know it's not like a lesson book, but like it's such a cool takeaway. That's like, no, I feel like what I do does matter, even if it doesn't fix everything.
Right, like I feel like it doesn't have to be one thing or another. It doesn't have to be like, yes, we did one thing and now the world is like a utopia forever, but it also doesn't have to be like super grim, dark, like everyone is terrible and evil and the world will be terrible forever in all ways.
Right. Now, does this mean that we're going to get another book 15 years after this one?
Oh, gosh. Probably not. I feel like I mean, like, never say never, right? Like, sure. I may return to this universe eventually, but...
Yeah. I just want to feel like, I feel like at that point we're living in a board game world where like each turn is 15 years and it's
right.
like...
Or we're just doing Star Wars at that point.
That's
like
true.
Every few years it's like, okay, let's just see what the new generation's up to now. Oh, still blowing up the Death Star? Cool. Like,
yeah, cool motive, still murder. Listen, no one's mad if it ends up being Star Wars, so...
Exactly.
So on sort of a slightly lighter note, both of your books are delightfully hilarious and witty and fun, as I shared in the first line. Is that like a choice that you feel like, this is like, kind of a weird question, I know some of this kind of just happens, but like, do you make that choice as like, oh, my character's voice is gonna be like funny or snarky, or do they just like come out because you're very funny? And I wrote down here next to my question, yes, that part was a softball.
Yeah, no, I think I'm hilarious personally.
Great, next question.
I don't know if you were able to tell from this. But yeah, no, I don't know. I think I kind of alluded to this the last time we chatted also during the REBELWING launch, but like, as much as I love like epic SFF, like even when we're playing with these like incredibly epic stakes, I've always, at least when I'm writing it, I think there are other authors who do this better than I do, but when I'm writing it, I have a hell of a time taking myself seriously. To put it frankly, like I'm just like, I don't think I have that in my voice necessarily. And that might also kind of just be an effect of my own personality, because I so rarely take myself incredibly seriously just in my day-to-day life. Because I'm like, why would I? Like, I know myself. I know like the silly, stupid things that I have done.
I know what this situation is.
Yeah, I'm just like, I see no need to set myself up for failure. But I think like, because like I so rarely take myself seriously, and I like find it very difficult to like write in a way that like takes this, not like write in a way that takes the story seriously, because obviously you do want to do justice to the story, but like, I don't know, I find that like it's never so, like, I don't think it's possible for me to create a world or a story where there isn't some room for humor and some room for self-deprecation and some room for just like a bit of lightness, even in the midst of like really grim, messed up, difficult stakes. Because like, I think that again is kind of true to my own life, where it's like, yeah, no matter like how dark my life has gotten and how bad things are, there's always some room for humor, and there's some room to find, I guess, like light in the darkness.
Yeah, I mean, I think if TikTok has taught us anything, it's that. So
exactly.
No, I love that. And like, I think it's worth saying, like, the humor and like the funniness in the book is never at the expense of the characters, which is sometimes something that you see with some authors. I'm like, oh, they're making fun of their characters now. And like, this is partially because it's such a close POV, but like, it's the character finding humor in the world, not like you making fun of the character's situation.
Yeah, no, I think like that is one commonality across most of my POV characters, is that like they often have like my particular brand of humor, and like, even when they have different personalities, like that Andrea voice tends to come out.
Yeah, which it's a great voice. I'm a fan.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna get into a fun one now. Are you ready?
All right, let's do it.
Because all of these have been very serious so far. So you are assembling the ultimate fighting team of characters from across your books. Who is on it?
Oh man, I mean, I gotta put Nick on there, just like right off the bat, because he is like, as like difficult as his life has been and as many like psychological and physical challenges as he's had to deal with, like he is legitimately just like the ace, like far and away, just tremendously talented. I don't think he would love for me to put him on the team, but I think he would. He might be able to stomach it if it was for a good enough cause. So I think that's like the first one I would think of. Like if it were really important for me to win, I'd be like, okay, I feel like he's kind of like my get out of jail free card.
I don't know. We can
definitely
tell him it's a good enough cause for sure.
Well, exactly. Yeah. How many slots am I allowed to have?
That's true. I didn't put a number on it. Let's say 5.
5.
Oh, okay. Have some room, but it's not every character you've ever written.
It's not every character I've ever done. I think I would put Annabelle, who shows up in REBELWING and is the aunt of the protagonist in Renegade Flight on there, just because she is like, not only is she just like hyper competent and like really good at almost everything that she's ever done, she also she doesn't have like the Nick hangups. Like she's actually a smooth sailor through life and is also just like frankly a lot more ruthless than he is. Like as dangerous as he is as a person, she's arguably equally dangerous and also just like doesn't feel bad about being that dangerous.
Yeah, she'll make the hard choices that you need to make.
Hard choices. She'll pull the trigger when triggers need to be pulled. Like she'll be like, oh, no, I will be the anti-hero or the villain if necessary. Like
yes, this is important.
Right. So yeah, I'd say Nick.
That's 2.
Oh man, who else am I gonna put on there? So we're pulling from both REBELWING and Renegade Flight, right?
Yeah.
There's a character I can think of that would be a good pick, but it also might be a spoiler. So I think I'm gonna refrain from adding this person because they're a teenager in REBELWING and they show up as an adult in Renegade Flight, and like their adult self, I think, is actually a pretty stealthy, important player. But
yes, I know who you're referencing, and I agree, but we won't say it out loud.
We're not going to say aloud who it is.
Yeah, that'll be the silent 6th spot.
Yeah, instead, I think I'm gonna throw Alex in there, actually, especially if I'm gonna put Annabelle in, just because Alex is kind of like in the same way that like Annabelle's like kind of like merciless and like hyper competent and scary and somewhat morally ambiguous. Alex is like kind of like the gentle tempering influence, and he's also like an actual adult. So like,
are we going with adult Alex or teen Alex?
I think we'd have to go with adult Alex. I feel like teen Alex has still got some stuff he's figuring out. Adult Alex, I think, has kind of sufficiently come into himself that even if he's like a little he's a little rustier than teen Alex was when it comes to the actual fighting, but I think he's also like older and wiser and will like work and is like better at being a team player in a lot of ways. So I feel like he's a useful person to have on the team just to make sure that like it doesn't just descend into utter chaos and that Annabelle doesn't use it as a mechanism to just like take over the world and start like.
That's important. You need to have someone to keep a check on that. That's 3.
Person. Yeah, so that's 3. I have 2 more slots open. You know, I'm going to give one to Vi. I think Vi is actually really good at what she does. Like, more Vi at the end of the book than Vi at the beginning of the book.
Sure.
But yeah, for all of her flaws and the mistakes that she makes, I think that she does admirably kind of bounce back. And I think that is something that you want in a fighter. Like, and especially because she is, like, time and time again, she's pressure tested and she's able to overcome it. Like I think like one of my martial arts teachers, Asher Wilmer, who teaches at the Fighter's Garage, mentioned at one point, Asher, correct me if I'm getting this anecdote wrong, but he talks about like one of his Muay Thai fights, and I was asking him about like, okay, how did it feel going in? Were you nervous? Like, were you nervous before? Were you nervous during? And he was like, you know, like I was scared at the beginning, like before we even like touched gloves. And then it was like, I think he compared it to like, once the fight actually started, the first time somebody hits you, like really hits you, then like if you're kind of like in that zone, he was like, it's like when you're wearing really nice clothing and you get a stain on it. And like
what at that point?
This entire time about getting your clothes dirty, and now it is, and you're just like, oh, to hell with it. Like it's gonna be what it's gonna be now, and I'm just gonna throw down. And after that, he wasn't nervous anymore. And I feel like Vi has that psychology, and I think that's important into the fight. So I'm like, I feel like she has like the good like fight psychology that would be very valuable on this team. So I'll give her the 4th slot.
Okay, and also she's the main character of the book we're promoting this week, so that's important too.
Yeah, I'm like, I was just like, oh, I'm gonna be kind of a jerk author and just not give either of my protagonists like a slot.
Right.
But I'm like, I will give Vi her due.
I think Vi's a good one. And then so we have one more.
One more. Ooh.
Yeah.
One, yeah. Okay, controversial choice. I'm gonna go with Roz. We haven't talked about Roz yet. But Roz is a killer. Roz is kind of a jerk. Like not gonna lie. Like if this were an anime, she would definitely be like Vi's like mean shonen rival. But yeah, she is unapologetically like kind of a jerk, but like she can kind of back it up as well. So I'm just like, I feel like she has that like raw aggression that like that you kind of that can kind of give you a bit of an extra edge. So like, whereas everybody else is just like highly competent and methodical, she's like got just enough of that like berserker energy to like see them through to victory. So yeah, Roz, my controversial fifth slot will go to her.
I love it. I also think like Annabelle being in charge of Roz would be a very dangerous combination.
Ooh, I'm here for this though. Yeah. I really like that idea actually.
Yeah. Okay, so that'll be book 3. Okay, so speaking of Roz, you have like a delightful, almost like Breakfast Club style band of miscreants as your ensemble cast in Renegade Flight. And I would love to hear more about them and like the characters, and if you had a favorite one, like what they helped you do with the story, that sort of thing.
Oh man, yeah, no, I really liked assembling my little Breakfast Club crew. Because I knew, like, so part of what makes the plot, like the premise of the plot work, is that the way that Viola, despite being kind of branded a cheater and a disgrace at the beginning of the book, is able to still attend this highly prestigious academy, is that she essentially goes in as a probationary student, where they're like, we'll let you in, but you're on thin ice, and you have to go into this, like, special delinquent class of other people who are also extremely talented, like, piloting candidates, but who have also just, like, made not great choices in their lives that have us kind of eyeing them, going like, you're a little sketch, but also you're really talented, so we can still probably use you. So we're going to put you in that barrel, the like talented but damaged goods barrel. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to stick her in that barrel, I have to think of like viable damage, I guess, for the other people who would be in that barrel. And like, I knew right off the bat that they couldn't all be like her, right? Because she's kind of a unique case where she comes from this place of extreme privilege, like very wealthy, powerful, well-connected family, like has kind of been groomed for this her entire life. So I was like, okay, typically if you're kind of in the bad egg barrel, you don't come from that level of privilege. Often you have a lot of factors working against you, right? You have many, many environmental factors that you've likely had to overcome that have led to you making kind of bad choices. So I was like, okay, so I had a lot of fun kind of coming up with the backstories for the other characters. So we have one character, Tamara, who like, this was a nod actually to the world of REBELWING, where she is an illegal book smuggler.
Love it.
There, and that kind of refers back to what Prue was doing in REBELWING, where she was also kind of like running like books into like highly censorship driven territories of North America that were not supposed to be sold there, and making like extra cash on the side. So I was like, okay, what if I have a character who basically does what Prue used to do, but like on a massive legal scale, and gets caught for it. So like that was a really fun one to come up with. I have like, I think a couple others who are sort of just like, we really like mechs, and we're just going to like go and commit like what amounts to like Grand Theft Auto because like it's fun, and like we don't have any money, and so this is our only chance to like get our kicks. And then I think we have at least one character who like legit like killed somebody, but like
there's one legitimate murderer in there.
There's one legitimate murderer who's just like very blasé about just straight up being a murderer, who I also kind of love. Incidentally, she's good friends with the book smuggler, which I love.
She's
like,
my favorite.
It's like the two opposite ends of the scale of like how bad can your crime be? Is like, oh, I sold like kind of like, you know, cheeky comics into like this like very like totalitarian regime, like, oh, so terrible, versus somebody who's like, no, I straight up killed a guy, he had it coming. Like,
but don't worry everyone, it was for a good reason.
It was for a good reason. Guy did have it coming. Like,
it's very Chicago. No, I love it. I love that we have like Top Gun, and then like in the classroom off the hallway also Six of Crows is like quietly happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like, listen, we know that you've got your sort of pilot thing, but you're going to need some criminal activity and subterfuge soon. And so we're just here to provide that for you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so just so everyone knows, Andrea and I are going to keep chatting for a little bit, but if you have questions for Andrea, pop them in the chat now, because it takes like a second sometimes for the comments to come through to me. So put questions in there. If you don't have questions, if you want to praise her, that's also cool, but I'll pull them up as they come through now. But in the meantime, I would love to hear about the mechs in this world and the last world, because we had obviously REBELWING and the aforementioned REBELWING, but they've gotten a lot more advanced now. So I'd love to hear more about them and like how you created the technology.
Oh man, so that was actually one of the hardest parts. I will fully credit my editor Julie with this one, because like my first draft just did not address it at all. Like I was kind of just like,
were you just like, listen, I came up with one cool mech the last time. I don't know what else you expect.
I'm like, I don't know how to come up with other. I'm like, I guess everyone will just have like dragons, like it's fine, or maybe like other fun. I think actually I did have like other fun animals.
Wait, what was the best animal that you had to cut from the draft?
Like keeping in line with that, like I was just like, I think my brain was sort of just like, well, the dragon worked the last time. Maybe I can just make them all weird animals. And then eventually it just got too crazy, and I was like, okay, we need to like cut this down a little. But yeah, no, Julie asked really good questions in her edit letter when I was between drafts, where she was like, hey, you know, this is a world that is like within like a generation of the previous world, but it's definitely like a decade plus is definitely enough time, as we know from like real life, for technology to advance pretty significantly. Look no further than the number of times I've been guilted into updating my iPhone. But yeah, so you keep on getting updates on mechs, and like I think one of the major points of that in the sort of like new world of Renegade Flight is that sentient mechs, which were like the new hot thing in REBELWING, and there was really only one of them, are like kind of commonplace now.
Yeah, they're like a thing.
Yeah, like they're definitely a thing. Like it's not like you can like walk into like your average giant robot dealership and just like buy one like fresh off the rack, but at the same time, like you do have like a nice little fleet of them that's like very tightly controlled and regulated. But like they exist in bulk now to an extent, and it isn't just like the one prototype that existed in like REBELWING. So I feel like that was probably my key transition, is that like things that were incredibly rare and like just starting to come up in REBELWING are now, if not exactly commonplace in Renegade Flight, at least somewhat normalized. So it's not like this weird funky technology. It's like, okay, we know what it is, we know how it works. It's just a matter of like figuring out stuff like regulation and making sure that no one abuses it and that it doesn't cause like a terrible arms race Cold War to happen.
You know, whatever.
Right?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, if you think back 15 years from now, that was 2006. Technology was very different then.
Right. Yeah. I think I still had like a flip phone back then.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I was like lucky to have a flip phone in 2006.
Right? Yeah. I remember thinking like my flip phone was super cool because it like came in fancier colors than some of the other flip phones.
You had one of the good ones. That was a better phone than I had.
You could play like really rudimentary games on it. Like
Snake. Whoa. So we have a couple of questions. So first off, Genevieve asks, is this book in the same geographic area as the last one?
Ooh, good question. We start in North America because Viola is Annabelle's niece, so she is Canadian, Korean Canadian to be specific. We actually move on over to Hong Kong for the events of the boarding school narrative, because that is where I decided to set the Flight Academy, partially as like a very blatant nod to Pacific Rim, because that is where they had their Shatter Dome, and I love that movie.
Why not?
But also partly because like my godparents live in Hong Kong, and I like kind of grew up like going and spending summers with them. And one thing that I've always loved about Hong Kong is that it is this really unique place with a deeply, deeply diverse kind of cosmopolitan context and history. And like, obviously, Hong Kong in present day is like very different from like the Hong Kong of this imaginative world, because they are going through all kinds of awful, tumultuous things.
Yes.
But it does have
identical dragons.
Right. Yeah. But like
two differences.
Right. But yeah, but Hong Kong, like, I guess, like, historically, and this is my, like, East Asian civilizations IR nerd coming out, like, it has historically kind of existed as this place where, like, kind of, like, a lot of different cultures have collided with each other, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently, sometimes, like, a little of this, a little of that. So I felt like that was, in a lot of ways, a really interesting place to put what amounts to, like, this international academy for people from all over the world who are all kind of brought together by this common cause with a very specific skill set. So the first half of that answer was like my fangirl answer. The second half was the like, okay, let's think about this a little more deeply answer.
Both are good.
Yeah.
So I'm jumping around the questions a little bit. But Finballion asked, did you approach the world building differently from REBELWING? Did having a foundation in REBELWING change your approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I struggled with was from the start, I wanted this to be a standalone. Like I wanted somebody to be able to read Renegade Flight without having read REBELWING and like be able to enjoy it and like understand what was happening without just being like, okay, I have no idea what's going on in this world. Which was again something that my editor Julie helped me out with a ton. But yeah, having a foundation in REBELWING was both helpful and kind of a hindrance in that respect, because sometimes I would catch myself. It was helpful to have like kind of like a skeleton in a landscape that I'd already built lined up. The problem with that was when trying to introduce it as a standalone, I'd catch myself referencing something that had happened in REBELWING but had not been referenced at all in Renegade Flight. It caught me out a few times and was just like, your readers, if they haven't read REBELWING, will not know what you're talking about there. Like we need to find a way to kind of like introduce this a bit more organically. So I would say like, yeah, the answer is both yes and no. Like yes, having a foundation to go off of, super, super helpful for any kind of world building endeavor, like having already done the legwork in the first book. No, because I also can't just rely on what I did in the first book.
Right. And as somebody, by the way, who reads many, many books very, very quickly and often far apart, it's very nice for me to not have to remember everything from a first book to enjoy a second book.
Yeah.
Like, I love REBELWING, but I read it like a year and a half ago now. I do not remember.
No, I'm the same way. Like sometimes, like even within the same book, if it's like really long and complicated, like a George R. R. Martin style novel, I'll like find myself like flipping back to refer to what happened on page 20 by the time I've hit like page 400, just because I legit don't remember what happened to one of the characters.
Right. Now, before we get on to, we have more questions. We're going to answer them. Don't worry, everyone. We're going to answer them. Do we want to take a moment and ask our question of the audience for our giveaway and tell the audience what our super cool giveaway will be?
Yeah, so our super cool giveaway is going to be a signed, annotated copy of REBELWING so that you can have the companion novel to read alongside the shiny new copy of Renegade Flight that you will hopefully be ordering from One More Page Books. If not already, then definitely in the very near future.
Yes.
Yeah, did we have an idea of what kind of question we wanted to ask?
If you don't have one, I will ask one. If you have one that's like in your heart, but if not.
I think I'll let you take the reins on that one, actually.
Okay, so, and if you guys are watching on YouTube or on Facebook, I see all those comments. You can answer this either one, and we're going to randomly select an answer. So don't panic. It's going to be random. If you could live in any science fiction world, so not fantasy, this is science fiction, because this is a science fiction book. These dragons are science. What would it be? So just post what that is. At the end of the event, we will pick one of them randomly, and you will win an annotations are so cool and they take so long for authors to do.
Yeah, like don't get okay. I don't want to get you to get your hopes too far. Like, there aren't going to be a ton. There will probably just be like fun little notes from me in the margins occasionally.
But that's still so fun.
Yeah.
And also in the comments that you will see on both Facebook and YouTube, I am reposting the link for you guys to buy signed copies of this book. Andrea will personalize them. She's coming this weekend, so if you get your orders in before the weekend, they'll be personalized. And if you don't, we'll figure something out. But get your orders in right away, because we want to sell as many, many copies as we can, because that's how we get Andrea to write more books. We sell copies of the books that she already has out.
Also, that was such a good question. I'm excited to see the answers. Also, I want The Dragons Are Science like printed on a t-shirt now.
Yes, perfect. We'll do that for book 3 for the launch for that.
Perfect.
So just to grab a couple more questions from the audience. This is a little one, I think, but Marina Lou wants to know, what's Jay Park up to in Renegade Flight?
I knew you were going to ask. Sorry. Em is a friend of mine who has also been in Discord leading up to this discussion.
Excellent.
Jay Park. Okay. So, again, I'm trying to, like, avoid spoilers here. Jay Park, I think, like, let's see. He would be, like, I think, like, in his mid-30s by now. So I think he's actually referenced a few times in Renegade Flight explicitly. but he is dealing with the Global Alliance of Nations, which is like the new kind of like international organization that was thrown together to deal with the rapid development of sentient mechs. And I think he's doing his thing where like for those of you who don't know Jay Park, he is a secondary character that was initially introduced in REBELWING as this like kind of like Capitol Hill-esque hotshot, like in his like late 20s, who's like already like an aide to like the person who's like in charge of this new government, and is like really like svelte and like seemingly deeply lazy, but like actually very good at his job, even though he spends all of his time avoiding paperwork and meetings. So he's that kind of character. And I would hazard to say that like by the time Renegade Flight rolls around, he's probably doing more of the same. I think if possible, he has probably like risen through the ranks of like governmental positions. So now he has interns who will probably do his paperwork for him, which makes him very happy.
Oh, he must love that.
I think, yeah. And I think that was like probably his great professional goal. I'm sure when they like had to like when all of the like employees in this new democratic government had to fill out the like, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? What are your professional goals? He was probably like, I would like to have risen sufficiently high to just have staff and interns to do all the boring parts of my job for me.
What else can you ask for, honestly? And then this question came from both Dana Belden and Laura Beth Johnson, asked variations of the same question about how did you write your second book and how has your creativity been affected by you've heard about this global pandemic thing, right, Andrea?
Yeah, man. I've seen something on the news about this like, COVID thing. Like pretty wild. People should get on top of that, man. But yeah, no, I mean, like, I'll give you the answer that you probably expect, which is that it sucks. Right?
It's very hard.
I remember like, oh God, I remember being so angry during like the early days of the pandemic because that was like right when I was doing like the hardest part of my draft, where I think I had done like my kind of like terrible zero draft that isn't even like really a real draft and had like gotten that in and was now having to like take everything apart and rewrite and do like the actual hard work of like creating this book. And so I was like stuck drafting like all day, every day. And meanwhile, this pandemic was happening and I kept on seeing like social media posts that were like, Shakespeare wrote King Lear.
Oh my gosh, I know, right?
So you can do anything during a pandemic. And I was just like, you know what? As somebody who's trying to like engage in like a major creative endeavor during the pandemic that I do in fact have to do like as a legitimate financial obligation.
Right. A legal obligation.
Like it's not fun or romantic, and it is not in fact helpful to my creativity to like never be able to leave my apartment. So I was very salty like in March and April. I think it's gotten a little bit easier since as like I've kind of adjusted, but I still like, you know, it's still not great. I would still love to go and like sit in a cafe and like do things as we used to do, but like it is what it is, man. Like
yep. But good news, I found the cat.
You found the cat? Oh yeah. No, I saw a flash of like a floofy black tail.
Yes.
Across the
street. Are you gonna be polite and say hello? Jenny's dinner time is in 5 minutes and she's very aware of it. Jenny, say hello, say happy Renegade Flight Day.
Hi. The true star of the show has arrived.
Yes. Okay, she said that inside her heart. Okay, so I want to I figured out how we're gonna do this. Give me 1 second. Think amongst yourselves. Let's see. Okay, pick a number between 1 and 7, including 1 and 7. They're included in that range.
Wait, am I supposed to pick the number or is our audience picking?
No, you're picking the number because you're going to randomly select.
I'm going to pick the number between 1 and 7, right?
Yeah, including 1 and 7.
I'll go with 6.
6. Okay, so the winner of our annotated book is Marina Liu.
Oh my God! Okay, that's actually perfect. I know because I know you like in real life. I'm like, I know exactly what kind of annotations are going to go into this book now.
Amazing. So Marina, I'm going to put a email address in the comments, and you can just send your actual address to this email address. It's our events coordinator. It's not anything weird. And she will get the book mailed out to you, so we don't have to worry about touch in the global pandemic. But thank you everyone for telling us your delightful places that you would live. there are so many fun things in here. A lot of Star Wars.
Star Wars is a solid choice. There's like, it's like Star Wars is such an expansive universe. I feel like it's one of the sci-fi worlds where you just like would never get bored.
Yes, and 2 different people said Dragon Riders of Pern. So
yeah, that's
awesome. Dragons,
science dragons in it.
Yes, which I support. Star Trek, Beta Colony. So yeah, great work, everyone. But before we go, Andrea, we are basically out of time. But I would love to know what is next.
Oh, what's next, Reed? So I have actually another sort of cyberpunk-esque sci-fi YA novel coming out called The Kingdom of Without, that is set in this alternate history-based cyberpunk Beijing and concerns a heist that will have revolutionary consequences in this fun new world order. So some similar themes that we saw in Renegade Flight and REBELWING, but going in a different direction, completely different setting, completely different characters. So it should be a lot of fun. And that is out, I believe, fall 2022.
Yay! So hopefully we can have you back for that one. Maybe by then we will be able to have it actually like in the store with people there, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Hope springs eternal, right?
I know, right? We'll do so much high-fiving. It'll be amazing. But thank you so much, Andrea. And congratulations again. Renegade Flight, everyone. It's amazing. You don't need to read REBELWING to enjoy it, although you should. REBELWING is also very good and fun. So buy them both. They're YA books. They don't cost that much money.
If you love Renegade Flight, it might inspire you to want to read REBELWING and like meet the teen versions of the funky adult characters who show up.
And I don't like, normally I feel like with sequels I can like pick a favorite. These are both very different books, which I like a lot. Like they're telling different stories.
Yeah, I was trying really hard not to just like write the exact same book over again.
Right. And you super didn't. But it means that now I can never choose which one of them I like more. They're both great. So buy them. And congratulations, Andrea. And thank you again, everyone, for coming out. If you liked this sort of thing, we do many events virtually here at One More Page Books. You can check them out on our website. Follow us on all of our social media. Usually you won't see my face quite this much in it, but sometimes. And anything else you want to say, Andrea, before we sign off?
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Like, I know, like, times are really hard right now. So, like, the fact that you've all taken time out of your day to, like, sign on and check out this event, like, and, like, listen to me ramble, essentially, about fictional humans that I made up, really, like, means the world to me. Like, thank you so, so much for your support. Like, this was so much fun.
Well, we're really fun ramblers, I think.
We are really fun ramblers. And thank you, Amanda, for being my co-rambler here. It's always
I would be your co-rambler any day of the week. So good night, everyone. Thank you. And watch out for any mechanical dragons you might encounter on the streets or befriend them. Up to you.
There you go.
Bye.
Bye.